Lindsey. I am a counselor here at MinPrep, and I am super excited to get started and to talk a little bit about our deadlines that are approaching just around the window.
Lindsey. I am a counselor
Oops,
here at MinPrep.
I turned off my sound, making sure everything works. I'm really excited though that you guys are all here and to join us. And this is definitely going to be an interactive webinar. So if you have any questions, feel free to start typing them into the chat, and I'll be, handling them as we go along. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about understanding the deadlines, how it can affect your success rates. So everything will be covered about college admissions because those deadlines are literally right around the corner. But first, I'm going to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about why you should be listening to my advice. So my name is Lindsey, and I'm a counselor here at moonprep.com. And I've previously worked as a writer and an SAT, ACT tutor for the past 5 years. I work one-on-one with students to help them raise their academic profile. But my real passion is helping students create a compelling personal statement and helping them emerge as a stronger writer. I personally do a lot of the writing here at MoonPrep, along with other members of our team as well. And we've interviewed admissions officers at colleges, medical schools, competitive summer camps, as well as leaders in the university and medical school admission industry. And really, our whole goal is to make sure that we are spreading the right information and giving you up to date information as well, especially because a lot of things have changed. And here at MoonPrep, we are made up of independent college counselors who work with students virtually and guide them throughout the entire college application process, but also high school. And so here, our counselors at MoonPrep, we serve as a guide and a mentor to their students. We help younger students finding the right fit for their major, helping them narrow down their career interests, finding summer research opportunities or internships, or even shadowing experiences. Our goal is to help them build the strongest possible applicant profile. So when senior year comes around, they're a really competitive candidate for even the most selective universities. And now, for our rising seniors, we help guide them through the college application process. So, really, nothing is missed. Um, so, as you can imagine, our seniors are really busy right now, as a lot of you probably are too. We're helping them brainstorm the perfect college essays. We're working on them one on one. And as you can imagine, we don't work a normal 9 to 5 job. We're working nights and weekends and in various time zones, basically, whenever it's convenient for you as the student to make sure that you are getting the work done as needed. Our goal really is to help the students, fill in that gap for the counselors. So we focus on our students' individual needs and work with them on medical school applications, undergraduate applications, grad school applications too. Our focus really is BSMD programs, but we also help students with applying to Ivy Leagues, traditional universities of every single major. So feel free to ask any questions. About anything that you might, have questions about. And so I do see some people are here. Hopefully you guys can all hear me, and we're gonna, get into the bulk of the information. Now, as I said, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll definitely be pausing throughout to make sure that we get you guys the best information possible. But first, just as a little thank you, we are offering a personal statement package. If you're a senior and haven't started your personal statement yet, we really encourage you to take advantage of this personal statement package. I'll also put a link to our personal statement webinar we did a couple of months ago at this point. And you can watch that and then, contact us to watch this personal statement or take advantage of this personal statement package. So with this, you get a brainstorming call, you get an outline. And so a lot of the times our outlines are super intensive. We're going paragraph by paragraph. We're doing 2 rounds of edits with you, making sure that you get the most polished essay possible. But, if you've already gotten there and you're just trying to learn a little bit about applying early, I got that information for you. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the different ways to apply early. So there are early action, early decision, and restrictive early action. And so I'm going to break these all down for you. And they can be a little bit confusing because there are very similar names. They all have early in them. And there's different rules attached to each one. So I can clarify as need be as well. And making sure that we are clearing up any issues you have about understanding which one might be right for you. But first, I'm going to talk about early decision and its lesser known counterpart, early decision 2. Now, these application deadlines are both binding. So you can only apply to one school in each round of early decision. So you can apply to one school early decision, and if you don't get in, you can apply to another school early decision too. Now, kind of the catch and what it means to be binding is if you get into a school that you apply early decision, then you are obligated to attend unless there are financial issues that make attending impossible. Applying early can help you showcase your interest because if you're accepted, you're bound by ED rules to attend. And not just, sorry, I said applying early. Applying early decision can really help showcase your interest because you're basically obligated to attend. Now, those decisions are in about 3 weeks, usually November. November 1st and November 15th are usually the most popular deadlines for the early decision one round, whereas for January, it's, January 1st, January 15th. And remember, you can only apply to one school early decision. The rest will have to be early action and regular admission. And just a little side note, restrictive early action is not allowed. So when you send in your agreement in your application, you and your parents, as well as your counselor, all have to sign an agreement saying that you are going to attend the college if accepted, and if you're offered an adequate financial package. So I think that that's what our students always freak out the most, wondering when, if they have to go, what will happen if they can't afford it. There is that little caveat, so you don't necessarily have to attend if they don't offer you enough money. Now, these decisions are usually sent mid December. So by Christmas, by the new year, you're already knowing where you're going to college. You already have your financial aid set. And a lot of your peers are still freaking out trying to, work towards that January deadline. So that's why these deadlines are often really popular with our students. Now, the kind of other catch here with ED, if you get in, you are technically obligated to withdraw all other college applications. So it's kind of a risk. You don't know what would have happened with the other ones. You might have done a lot of work applying to early action schools, um, but that's kind of the risk. Now, once you do get that acceptance letter, you then inform the college that you are accepting their acceptance, and then you send in that non-refundable deposit. And this is probably going to be within 2 weeks of getting your accepted letter. And so that's really far in advance of that May 1 decision date for everyone else. Now, I do see a question. I'm going to answer this one because I think it's kind of relevant. So this one says, how early are we talking, junior year or just early in terms of their senior year? Yes, this is all kind of based for seniors. This is when you'll be able to start applying, is really your senior year. So these deadlines are really occurring right now. For example, the University of North Carolina, their deadline is October 15th, so right around the corner. And we have a ton of November 1st deadlines as well. So it's really coming up really soon. So all of these are applying to right now for your senior year. And then, the same information will apply if you're a junior. These deadlines, these types of applications aren't going to change. Even with COVID changing everything, these deadlines are pretty much going to stay consistent. The rules, for the most part, are staying consistent as well. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving on. And if you have any questions about ED, what it means, if it's a good idea for you, kind of talking in general terms, we can definitely cover that as well. So if you're wondering though, why someone would want to apply ED, if you're, putting all this work, maybe you'll get in. We're going to get into that later. We're going to get into the stats of it all later, but it is really a strong statistical move to apply early decision. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about early action. So many schools, here I'm going to break this down like this. Many schools will offer both a regular admission and an early action deadline. And early action just means you're going to have to apply earlier than the regular deadline. But the advantage is that you find out a bit earlier whether or not you get accepted. Now, most schools will have an early action deadline in November. November 1st and November 15th are really the most common. And as you can imagine, this is, a full 2 months earlier than the regular decision deadline. So those are typically in January. So you really have to have your act together to make sure you're able to put together a strong application. So here are a few things to consider. Of course, this is a little bit different this year because the SAT and ACT a lot of times for schools are test optional. So if you haven't taken your test yet, that's okay. A lot of times it doesn't even matter. But if you are wanting to take it again, the last chance would really have been that September test date. This year is a little bit different because everything's getting pushed back, but in normal times it would have been September. Now schools are even accepting through October. and maybe even later, but it's a case by case school. So if you're applying early action, you should already have your scores. If you're going test optional, it's okay. You don't have to worry about that. If you are a junior, if you're a sophomore, we do recommend that you take it during the fall of your junior year. Again, maybe in the spring. And if you need to, you can even take it in the summer after your junior year. But of course, with the test optional, it's becoming less and less important. But it also depends on the programs. We work with a lot of BSMD students, those are direct medical students, and those programs still, for the most part, are requiring the SAT or ACT. So if you have your eyes at kind of on that type of program, you will still have to take the SAT or ACT. Now, letters of recommendation are also something that you need to think about. Um, this is something that our students tend to forget until it's kind of last minute, but we really recommend that if you haven't asked and you're planning on applying early action, you ask literally like today or tomorrow. You want to make sure that your teachers are able to write you a letter of recommendation. Your mentor, your coach, your manager, they're writing you a strong letter of recommendation, and if they're rushed, they're not going to be able to write you a great letter. And if you're a junior, if you're a sophomore, you need to file that information away. You could even ask them, as early as right before your junior year. The summer before your senior year. So you can be asking them well in advance. They can have all summer to work on it if they want. You can already get that, yes to the letter of recommendation. Just something to think about. And this is also advice for the juniors, but we do advise you to work on your personal statement during the summer. Obviously, for our seniors, it's a little late now, but you should definitely have a draft done by now if you're planning on applying early action or early decision to a school. At least, your first rough draft. Time is kind of the essence right now. You have a lot of essays to be writing, so make sure that you are writing your personal statement. Once you get off this webinar. If you haven't started, start brainstorming. We do have a ton of resources that I'll email you guys a link to, but it's just moonprep.com/resources. Tons of advice for you to help with your brainstorming and your examples and how to show, not tell. But we have a lot of advice for you if you are interested in doing that. Now, for early action, the kind of thing about it is it's not binding. So you can apply to as many schools early action as you want, and you do have until decision date or May 1 to tell the schools whether or not you'll be attending. So that means you can still compare admissions and financial aid offers from other colleges, even if you apply to them regular decision before accepting an offer and sending in your deposit. Okay, so I do see a question about aid. Okay, so suppose I feel like my EA schools will give me more aid. How do I decide if I cancel all my EA applications or my ED acceptance? Um, so you wouldn't know. That's kind of the thing. You probably wouldn't find out about your early action until much past the deadline that you would have to say yes to your ED school. So it's kind of a calculated risk on your part. So what we kind of suggest that you do is you go and there's a couple different websites. I think it's called like Merit More that you can go on and calculate how much aid you'll get from schools. And at least kind of being able to weigh your option before you even pick your ED school. That's something we recommend to our students. Not just applying super reach. The pipe dream schools, but also like kind of considering could we reasonably afford this. So it is hard to say, which one you'll be able to get financial aid for, but you likely wouldn't even find out until you've already sent in that non-refundable deposit to your ED school. Now, for EA, I'm assuming that this is what this question is about. It's not binding, right? So for early action schools, those are not binding. So that means you can apply to 20, you can apply to 5. If you get into all 20, good for you, but you don't have to accept any of them. So that's kind of the good thing about early action. You get your applications in a little bit earlier. You tend to find out a little bit earlier. We'll go into the stats about it a little bit later, but it can be, a really nice way just to get those acceptances, be able to have time to figure out what you might be wanting to do with your college applications, college acceptances. Okay. So I'm going to keep going. I see some other questions that I think I answer later on in the webinar. So I'm going to pause them for now, but keep these questions coming. They're all really great. Because now I'm going to talk about restrictive early actions. So just to add in a little bit more complication, a little bit more terminology for you to remember, Restrictive early action. This is also called single choice early action. So it goes by the two, but today I'm just going to be calling it restrictive early action just for the sake of clarity. But it's another option for potential applications. So these options are part of the early admission plan, which incorporates both early action and early decision. So these are kind of really similar. Now, restrictive early action is a non binding early action admission option in which students may not apply to any other private school's early program, except a college outside of the US, a non binding rolling admissions program, a public college or university whose admissions is binding, or an ED program if the notification occurs after January 1. I'm going to put that in the notes because I think it is a little bit confusing. Um, Oops, I'm going to have to do it in two because of the character count. So here we go. But this is kind of important to know because there are such strict rules. I'm sorry, the formatting got a little messed up, but you guys get the point, I think. So the single choice is non-binding. You can apply to it, you can get in, you don't necessarily have to go. So single choice early action, restrictive early action is less restrictive than early decision because it's non-binding. But it is more restrictive than early action because you can only apply to one restrictive early action, but you aren't obligated to attend. And some schools that, at least in the past, I think this year some of them have switched, but I'm guessing it will go back after the pandemic calms down a little bit. But some schools like Boston College, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, these are all restrictive early action schools. And so if you really have your eyes set on one of those, it's a good idea to do restrictive early action. But of course, you shouldn't be doing it just because you think you should get your application in early. You want to make sure first you have a really strong profile. You've got great letters of recommendation. You've really honed and done a great job on your essays. So that's kind of the thing that we recommend is don't just apply early to get it over with. Make sure you're putting forth the best application possible. Okay, and I see that we do have some other questions. I'm going to stop and answer them too. Um, so this one is, if I'm placed on a waiting list for a top school, is it worth it to wait and delay committing to another school? Um, yes and no. So I would definitely recommend that you look at the history of the wait list of the school. So some schools, they accept a good portion of their students off the wait list. Other schools, they might never accept a student off the wait list just because of the demand of the school. So that's kind of worth paying attention to, doing a little bit of research. However, you don't have to commit to your school until May 1 unless it's early decision. And in that case, I would recommend you wait until May 1st to commit to a school. If you're on a wait list, it's kind of your top choice. Now, that being said, some wait lists will come as late as July. Some will even come August, like literally the week before. Some will, come in June and be like, okay, if you can start in the summer sessions, you can, matriculate into our school. So sometimes you have to be a little bit flexible and, understand that you might pay a deposit at another place. Then your dream school takes you off the wait list. You might lose that deposit, but it might be worth it to you. But I would definitely commit to another school by May 1st, regardless of whether or not what position you are on the wait list. If they do that, what you think your chances are. It's better not to risk it than and put down your deposit, lose the money, than to maybe not go anywhere for school. Um, and here's a good one. Would I get good aid even though it is not early decision? So that's a great question. So um, not necessarily. No, I would say it does not. Applying early decision, of not applying early decision doesn't really affect your aid. The thing to watch out for is some of the scholarship deadlines for the schools are different than the application deadline. So they might be earlier. Like the regular decision deadline might be in January, but you have to apply by December 1st to get access to some of the scholarships. You can know those like automatic merit scholarships. So I do recommend you pay attention to that to make sure you are getting as much aid as possible. So that's kind of something to consider, that you will get good aid no matter when you apply, as long as you're applying by that like priority scholarship deadline. So make sure to pay attention to that. Let's see. Okay. And this question too, this is a great question because we do work with quite a bit of international students. Does this apply for international students too? So sometimes it depends on the school, but sometimes you guys have separate deadlines. That this is when your international student deadline will be. So I would just recommend you look on the individual school website to make sure that there isn't a special deadline just for you international students. So just to be kind of aware of that. Let's see. See, there's some new messages. Um, okay, this is another great one. So, if I am accepted after being waitlisted, will my financial offer usually be less? Once again, not necessarily as long as you applied by that the merit scholarship deadline. If you're filling out the FAFSA as well, which opened up October 1st, the CSS profile. If you haven't done that, I do recommend that you fill out both of those right now, or your parents, because a lot of it is tax information. Those, a lot of the times, will be grants that you're getting from schools. A lot of it's tied up in that. And a lot of those are first come, first serve. So if you aren't applying to the school um, by if you're not, sorry, I lost my train of thought as I was reading another question. If you are applying to, or if you're applying for the FAFSA, a lot of them are first come, first serve. So if you apply before December, typically that's when you're able to get, the maximum financial aid that you would have qualified for. And no matter how, well off you think you are, how little money you think you'll get, everyone does get something. So we do recommend that you do fill out the FAFSA. So just something to think about. That's kind of a way, making sure you're paying attention to those priority scholarship deadline dates as well. Whether or not you applied, whether or not you get off the wait list, typically that doesn't hold too much bearing on your financial aid award. Okay. So for this one, another question about restrictive early action. And so I'll go back to this slide. So yes, with restrictive early action, you can only apply to that school early, and then the rest have to be either early action or regular decision. You can also apply to a school early decision too, too, as long as the deadline, I think it's what is it? If the notification of admission occurs after January 1. So there's kind of some strict rules about that. So you kind of have to look at it as case by case basis because some ED programs, ED2 programs, those notification of admission occurs after January 1. The deadlines are after January 1 anyway, so you'd be okay and could apply to school restrictive early action and also ED2. So that's something that some of our students do as well. And so then remember, the rest can be regular decision, early action, regular decision, and early action. There's, no matter which application platform you pick or application deadline you pick, you can be applying to whichever one you really want. So that's kind of the positive. Oh, this is another great one. So, how do the schools know if you haven't applied restrictive early action or ED to multiple schools? So, I mean, they really wouldn't. But the problem is if they did find out that you had, then you would get your application acceptance rescinded just like that. So it's not worth it. They might not know, they could know, but if they do find out that you applied that and you broke the rules, that would be a huge red flag, and you could be risking your acceptance to that school. And remember, your counselor also has to sign off on any early decision um, contracts, how you're signing that contract. Your counselor is also signing in. So it's not like it's just staying within your family, it's also going outside to your counselor. So they would see that you're applying early decision. They would, it wouldn't be able to happen that way too. So, whereas they might not know if you got your counselor in it. It's a huge conspiracy. I guess you could, but like I said, it's not worth it if they were to find out. And some schools have even shared lists of students who turned down the early decision and checking to see if students have accepted somewhere else, was applying early decision somewhere else, kind of like a niche group of student or colleges that were doing that. But that kind of too is a little bit weird for the colleges to do that. So you probably don't have to worry about that so much, but it's more of the fact that your counselor has to be signing off on the applications as well. Okay, let's answer a question about financial aid. So can you apply for financial aid in early decision or early action? Absolutely. So no matter which application platform or application deadline you're applying to, you can be requesting for financial aid. Will that affect your admission? Some schools are need blind, and those it will never affect. And then for other schools, typically it doesn't really affect your admission. But that being said, like, once the money kind of for them is gone, it might be at the end. Um, so it rarely ever happens though that a student doesn't get any money from a school, and especially those like automatic merit scholarships. As long as you are meeting the qualifications. And that being said, not every school offers these automatic merit scholarships. But if they do offer it, you can guarantee that you'll get it as long as you're applying by that priority scholarship deadline. And to answer your last question, if you can reject early decision for financial reasons, absolutely. That's the only way you can reject early decision acceptances is for financial reasons. Okay. And then another question about what I mean by junior year, the third year of high school. So fourth year is senior year when you're applying to colleges. Third year is junior year of high school. So in your third year, kind of whenever you're preparing. So I said some things about like letters of recommendation when to ask. You can be asking for those letters of recommendation that third year before you're applying to the scholarships. Okay, I think we got some of these questions answered. Yay, good. If you have any other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll definitely be stopping along the way again to answer some more questions. And if I, accidentally miss your question, feel free to just, reshare it down below and I will answer it then. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about why you might want to apply early decision or early action or restrictive early action. So the reason for the higher, or the reason why students will apply early action is because you have a huge boost in acceptance rates when you're applying early decision. So the reason for this is the higher admit rate is a yield rate. And yield rate in college admissions is the percentage of accepted students who choose to enroll in that particular college. So remember binding, if I give my um, accept 100 students under early decision, technically they're obligated to go. So I accepted 100 of them say they're coming. Looks like 100% of the students I accepted said they're going to come. That looks really good. Yield rate is something that, they're trying to increase their yield rate. The colleges are trying to increase the yield rate. They want more spots filled through early decision, which is binding, which means that their yield rate looks more attractive. They look more attractive to students who are applying. They look more attractive to kind of those ranking sites as well. So to improve your admission chances, you want to try and help the school's yield rate. So I'm going to break down the numbers here a little bit, but for early decision, it does, and for restrictive early action, it does help your odds of acceptance quite a bit. Now, early action, it doesn't help a lot, but it does help a little bit, and we'll break down those numbers as well. Here we go. So you can kind of see here the overall acceptance rate. These numbers are from 2018. From the overall acceptance rate to the regular decision acceptance rate to the early decision action, early decision or early action acceptance rate, and just the percentage of the class filled by early applications. I think that that's kind of the most important thing to look at too. Some of these schools are filling up half of their seats just by early applications. So the much larger regular decision pool, they're fighting over less seats. So as you can see from Columbia and Penn, almost half or more than half are applying, or over half of their class is accepted through early action, early decision deadlines. So as you can see, from 7% of the regular decision acceptance rate all the way up to 25. So a lot of times you're seeing a 3 times, 4 times acceptance rate boost. And we're going to break it down a little bit more too for you. So here are some more extreme examples. Harvard University has a 3.5 acceptance rate under regular admission, 21.1 under restrictive early action. So this is kind of where we recommend students who, fit the profile really well. They're a good match for Harvard. They have great experiences. They have a lot of, the right, in the previous years, the right test scores, the right grades, letters of recommendation are really strong. If Harvard's a good match for you, applying restrictive early action and it's your number one choice, or one of your top choices for restrictive early action because it's not binding, then it's a good idea to be applying restrictive early action. Over 6 times higher acceptance rate in the restrictive early action round. Now, this is for early decision at Princeton, 2018 again, 5.4% in regular admission, 18.5% to the regular, sorry, 18.5% in the early decision. Because remember, that's the binding one. So more than 3 times, nearly 4%, or nearly 4 times higher acceptance rate in the early decision round. And then a little bit more, Yale, 4.6, 15.5. It's a huge difference. And so, really, the big deal is with understanding what universities want, which is that yield rate. Um, so, for students that do have a dream school that offers early decision, then they might want to consider applying early. However, like I said before, with like the Harvard example, they should only apply early if their test scores and grades are within reach of the school. Then it can kind of help tip the odds in their favor if they apply under early decision or restrictive early action. You should probably not waste your early decision school in a university that you have no chance of getting into, even if there is a higher acceptance rate. So, for example, if the average accepted student, the range is like a 3.8 to a 4.0, and your GPA is a 3.5, your test scores are a little bit below 2, your resume isn't quite as strong as some other students, it'd probably be a waste to apply to do early decision. Maybe it'd be better to find a school that's a closer match to you to give yourself the best chances. Because even though you do get a huge statistical boost, it can only help you so much. They still are rejecting more than 80% of the students applying, so that's kind of something to think about. Now, to strategically pick the perfect early decision school, you should pick somewhere that one is your top choice, B, you can afford regardless of the financial package, and C is a university where you have a reasonable chance of acceptance. So kind of think about it as like needing a little extra boost to help you gain admissions. So, if you're within that range, you have your SATs in the mid to upper 1400s. If you do have it, if you don't have it, it's okay. You'll be in the top, 10% of your graduating class. Then you could be like a really strong candidate to apply an early decision to some of these really selective schools. Now, if you do get rejected or deferred, so that means that they're going to relook at you during the regular decision application pool, then you can apply to other schools. So, a strategic option would maybe be to consider early decision schools. So, early decision schools are very similar to ED1. So, if you're accepted, it means you're obligated to attend, regardless of the financial package or any other acceptances you may receive. And you're allowed to apply to one ED school. And if you don't get in, you can apply to an ED2 school. You can apply to the same school in early decision one and early decision two. You can apply to them in regular. You can only apply to them once per application cycle. Um, so just kind of think about how you can help with the yield rate that we talked about earlier. Okay, now I'm going to pause and answer some questions. Oh, thank you for repeating your question because I remember now I forgot. So I'm an early graduate student. I'm on track to graduate a year early. Perfect. How do I work to make my profile stronger to compare to students who went through the regular 4 years of high school? And then a kind of a follow-up question. Will my profile be considered weaker to admissions officers compared to others? I don't think so. I think it depends a lot on what you did with those 3 years. If you were really focused on academics and just kind of rushing through high school and weren't focused on extracurriculars or gaining outside experiences outside of school, then yes, your resume might be considered a little bit weaker. But they are seeing that you're finishing high school in 3 years, so they're not expecting you to have the same resume as your peers. Um, it is definitely possible to still get into really prestigious schools graduating early. And so, how you can make your profile stronger compared to students, I would say, like, think about what your passion is, what your interest is. Find ways that you can take that passion to the next level. So, even if it's like, you really love playing tennis, you're a great tennis player. You could become captain of the team. You could become, you could coach younger kids. You could start your own summer camp with the neighborhood kids, taking them off the hands of like, busy, overworked, stressed out parents for an hour every week. And, doing your own little summer camp like that. Um, if you really are into like volunteering or something like that, you could find a way that you can combine like multiple interests. Like if you really like skateboarding, you could donate skateboards. You could like start a fundraiser to like do skateboarding. It could be really anything that you're passionate about and taking it to the next level, finding ways to incorporate your passions, your interests elsewhere. So I don't think that, finishing early will necessarily have a negative effect on you. I think as long as you're going out there and you're getting really great experiences. Maybe you get an internship, even a virtual one over the next couple of weeks, months. Make sure you're like volunteering virtually if you'd like. There's a ton of options for even now during the pandemic to be safely building your resume. Okay, so let's see. So the university policy, oops, let me see, says that one may similarly apply to the restrictive early action to their school, yes, and to any public college university with a non-binding, yes, early action plan or early application deadline. But it says one can't apply early decision, early action, or restrictive early action to other schools. So you can apply. Maybe this is specifically for one university, but for the most part, if you're applying restrictive early action to a school, you can apply early action because it's non-binding. You can apply regular decision, you can apply rolling, as long as it's not binding. So that's why early decision and restrictive early action could never happen for one student. Um, but maybe this is one specific case, and I'm not quite sure though, because everything that I've ever heard of and like dealt with my students, it's always restrictive early action means you can apply early action and that's it. Or of course, rolling and regular, um, but no early decision. One, you can do early decision two. So that's kind of something to consider. Um, and I see here, what's the difference between RAC and AC again? Um, Is this restrictive early action, like REC or restrictive REA maybe? Can you repeat the question? Maybe I'll go back to a different slide so that you can look at them a little bit different and tell me which letters you mean, and I'll be happy to explain them. Um, okay, let's go down to the next question. Which type of mentors should we reach out to for letters of recommendation? And how would we know our letters are strong enough? That's a really great question. So, I recommend that you don't just reach out to the same type of person. So, you know, usually for schools, you do have to ask for multiple teachers. So maybe a science teacher and a math teacher, a science teacher, an English teacher, a history teacher, going for different areas of study, someone who will have something different to talk about you for. Um, so that would be kind of my biggest advice for teachers, and someone maybe that has to do with your major. So if you really want to be a doctor, maybe a science or a math. If you want to be a computer science scientist, a computer science teacher if possible. Something along those lines, I think, is a good idea. But for mentors, kind of outside, it should be someone who knows you quite well. I wouldn't go for prestige. Like if the president of the organization that you've maybe talked to once will write you a letter of recommendation, that letter is probably not going to be strong. But someone like your manager who worked with you really closely for years and years and years, who has seen you grow from like this position all the way up, they would probably have a lot of great things to say. So when you are doing your asking for letters of recommendation, we do recommend to our students that they send over like a little brag sheet. So their resume, their top, you know, qualifications, what they're interested in studying, making sure that the schools are or the teacher or the mentor, whoever it might be, knows enough about you. So even if you think that they should remember that you did XYZ in the club or whatever it might be, remind them because they have a lot going on, especially right now with pandemic. I feel like everyone's got like quarantine brain. So remind people, follow up with your letters of recommendation. But I would just advise you to ask, people that you really know have known for a long time, and have seen you in action. That's the most important thing. And so I wouldn't necessarily ask someone that a volunteer and then another volunteer and then a third volunteer place because ultimately, what kind of different things might they say about you? But if you've done different things, like if you've done volunteering, maybe if you had an internship, you ask your manager. If you have a job, you could ask your manager. Kind of trying to make sure that the letters show a different side of you, I think is the most important thing too. But ultimately, you won't know that the letters are strong enough. You just have to assume that if they say they'll write you a letter of recommendation, they are actually going to be recommending you. It'll be a strong profile. But for the most part, it's impossible to say. Um, and on the Common App, you can request to see the letters, but we always recommend you do not, you waive that right because, we want to make sure that the letters are, accurate. They're not saying it just because they know you can read it, that kind of thing. Okay, now let me move on to the next one. This is a great question because, especially for this year, do I have to worry about applying an early decision if I won't submit test scores at all? So, if you aren't going to submit test scores, that's completely okay if the school is, of course, test optional. As long as the rest of your resume, your transcripts fit the profile. So, if your GPA is right on the average, then you can still apply early decision confidently. It's okay if you're not submitting a score. Just know that test optional doesn't mean that they won't look at other kids' scores if they do submit it. If a school is test blind, they won't look at them at all. But test optional means they'll still look at it if someone submits it. But if you don't submit it, it's okay. Okay. So another really good question. To summarize, regular decision is best for reach or safety schools, and early action and early decision for good target schools. So, yes and no. So, we do recommend that you apply to most of your schools' early action. So, definitely the target schools. And I would say you could even apply to some of your reaches early action too if you have the time. Like, if you have the application done, if you have the time, you don't need to hold off. I would say you can apply. Some safeties, though, maybe one or two in the early action. But if you have a lot of safeties, you can sometimes wait. But we do recommend that as many applications as you can do early action, and one early decision to get that done with. There's no point holding on to it. So if you can finish it, send it off. Um, Now for early decision, I do recommend you do like one reach for your early decision. Not a super super reach, but one that you do have a reasonable chance of getting into. Um, you know, if you're meeting the qualifications. Because remember, reach isn't just that, you could be meeting the qualifications. Like, for example, if the average GPA is a 3.8, you have that. If the average SAT score is a 1440, you have that. But if the acceptance rate is 15% or less, it's a reach for everyone, regardless of how great you are. Because, those Dukes, the Harvards, they're accepting 5%. Obviously, great kids are getting rejected every single day. So to kind of combat that, that's why those get categorized as a reach. So we do recommend that you apply to a reach that you kind of are on target for. It's just that the acceptance rate is so low. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so yes, this video will be available to watch again. So I'll be sending out the link to everyone who joined in. You can rewatch it. And you can go on our channel. You can subscribe to our channel, actually. We've got a ton of webinars coming up that I can actually send you guys the link to right now. But you can also watch it again as many times as you want after this webinar as well. So let me put this in the chat really quick. Okay, so the question back to what's the difference between restrictive early action and early action is restrictive early action you can only apply to one of the schools, and early action you can apply to as many as you want. So early action, non-binding, restrictive early action, non-binding, but restrictive early action, only one, and you can apply to early decision as well. You cannot apply to an early decision school. And for EA, you can apply to as many early action schools as you want, and then one restrictive early action or one early decision one. Okay, hopefully that answered. Oh, it's great questions. These are really good questions. Is it better to have extracurriculars rated related with my intended major, or does it not matter much? Personally, I like it when students are a little bit more diverse because, if you've only done science, 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 like, your interests are kind of more pointed. I like kind of a well rounded student, but that being said, a pointed student, one that has like their extracurriculars pointed in one area, that's okay too. There's no right or wrong area. I think as long as you're not doing 20 million different activities, and only lightly focusing on all of them, it's better to kind of cut down the number of activities to 6 to 10 or even less, 5 to 7, and doing those really deeply, spending a lot of time on them. And so that's kind of my recommendation is don't worry about so much what activities you're doing as long as you're spending quality time with them. Okay. So this is a really great question, and I'm going to go over this right now because I don't think I talk about this later. And I did talk about it a little bit before, but I'm going to cover it between safety, reach, and match. So for safety, that's a school that's got an acceptance rate of 50% or above. Your scores, your GPA are all higher than the average accepted student. So some state schools are often like this, depends on the state school, but there are a lot of schools that do have an acceptance rate of over 50%. So you have a really good chance of getting it. Now for target matches, or sorry, targets, those are also called matches. Those acceptance rates will be, 25 to 40%, 25, I guess, to 49.9%. Your, stats are on par with the average accepted student, but remember 25 to 40% acceptance rate. And then a reach is your maybe qualifications are a little bit below the average accepted student, and or your the acceptance rate is 15% or less. So that's kind of something to consider. Remember, Dukes, Harvards, the USC's, those are reaches for everyone, no matter who you are. So even if your stats are above the average accepted student, it's still a match because, or not. Sorry. If your stats are above the school, but their acceptance rates are 5%, it's a reach for everyone because of that low acceptance rate. It's too hard to predict what would happen. Okay, let's see. Ooh, so which of these decisions do you think is the most efficient and reliable for an international student? So like I said earlier, I think that there are different deadlines for international students at most parts. So I think that you guys have your own separate decisions that you have to follow. A lot of the times it is kind of in the earlier action kind of timeline. I'm not positive if you can apply early decision. So that would just be something I think you have to look at a case by case basis for the universities. Okay. So if we have any more questions, feel free to keep chatting with me. I'm going to move on with the content. I know we kind of skipped around here a little bit, so I'm going to move back. And any other questions you guys have, feel free to keep on writing them. So I think the important thing to remember is some universities do say that applying early doesn't increase the odds, but ultimately we've shown that's just not true. Applying early to as many schools as possible is the best idea. Early action to as many schools as possible is the right idea. You'll find out a little bit quicker. You have more time to make decisions. If you do have to apply to more schools during your, the regular decision round, you have that option. So when we're working with students, we really do recommend that they apply earlier. So let's see. If anyone has any more questions about early action, we're going to move on to some slightly more, slightly different topics, which is rolling admissions. So hopefully you guys can read it. I know it's kind of small, so I'll just go over this information at length. But rolling admissions is kind of its own beast. It's another way of applying. So if as you're putting together your college list, you might have seen that a school does have rolling admissions. And so this means that they're accepted on a rolling basis. Some schools begin taking applications as early as July and then will continue all the way through April, sometimes even later, until their class is full. And so that means that, they accept those applications as they come in. So as you can imagine, your application has a much better chance if you submit your application earlier rather than later. Now, the application process will be probably less competitive if you apply earlier for the rolling decision deadlines. The colleges have an empty incoming class, so they can't compare you to students who've already been admitted because no one else has been. So, of course, you still need good grades, a strong personal statement, and high test scores. I wouldn't recommend you just rushing into an rolling decision because you're like, I need to get in today. If your personal statement, if your school application isn't strong, it's better to wait a week, 2 weeks, make sure it's really strong. But the good thing is that, rolling admissions can really help reduce college admission stress. The earlier you apply, the earlier you know. Sometimes you can get your answer back within just 4 to 6 weeks. And sometimes it's even much quicker, like 2 weeks. So that means you can get your college admissions answer before you even start your senior year. Now, the good thing is rolling admissions does allow you to be a little more flexible in your decisions. It's not binding, so you can apply to as many as you want. You just have to make sure you apply before the school's deadline, and that means you might be able to apply even after college admissions close for other schools. So that's kind of a good thing. It's kind of your backup for if you don't get in anywhere, or you didn't get into the schools you wanted to get into. Now, remember, you should only apply rolling decision if you've taken, if it's not test optional, you have taken the SAT or AT score, you've gotten the scores that you need to get in, your personal statement is polished, your supplemental essays are ready to go. You want to make sure you're giving the same proper care to your rolling decision applications as you would your regular decision applications. Now, rolling admissions and regular admissions do look a lot alike, but there is a key difference is that universities that offer rolling admissions evaluate applications if they're received, while regular admissions tend to wait until all applications yeah, and look at all the applications after like a hard deadline. So, colleges that offer rolling admissions often will not close the admissions process until all spaces have been filled. And so it's kind of important to realize that applications are reviewed as they're received. So it can really help you improve your chances. It can help you, figure out aid and student housing a little bit quicker too. And now the good thing too is if you do get into your rolling admission school, it can help you kind of evaluate your school list and kind of say, okay, this is my safety. Would I rather go to the safety school or my rolling admission school that I've already gotten accepted with? And maybe that can help you make some choices later about how many schools you really want to apply to. Okay, now let's see. I'm going to stop and answer some more questions before I get into regular decisions. So this question is, my two rolling schools have honors college. Will applying early to rolling admissions increase my chances of getting to the honors college? That's a great question. So a lot of the times, these applications are the honors college are their own separate application. So you'll have to apply by December 1st or November 1, whatever it might be. A lot of times it'll be separate. So I don't think that would necessarily improve your chances of getting into the honors college as well. But that being said, it doesn't hurt to apply early and make sure you're getting in before the deadline because a lot of times it does have that deadline beforehand. Okay, this is another great question. I almost put this slide in here about targets and matches, and I should have. But what's a good number of schools to apply to? It really depends on what your college goals are. So if you're planning on applying in state, you're applying to maybe like your state school that's not, overly competitive. It's got an acceptance rate of 50% or above. You're applying to maybe some private schools, some other public universities in your state, maybe just 5 to 7. If you're a little bit more open, if you're going to apply outside your state, maybe a little more selective, 7 to 10, 10 to 12. Maybe I would say 10 is a good number for that actually. If you're applying to competitive programs like BSMD programs, the direct medical programs, if you're applying to Ivy Leagues or USCs or the Emorys of the world, you probably need to be applying to more than 15 schools. So, because they're just so competitive, the acceptance rates of those are 5%, 10%. So you have to kind of throw your hat in a lot of rings to make sure that you have a chance. So for those, if you're highly competitive is kind of on your radar, applying to more schools. But some students can get away with applying to 5 to 7, can get multiple acceptances, have options, and it's, okay. Okay. And how do I figure out which VSMD programs will be somewhat safety for me? Whew. So it's kind of the same thing as what I was talking about earlier with reach schools. It's because the acceptance rates are so low. Really, no BSMD is a safety. If you look on our website, actually, we do have a complete list of BSMD programs. I would recommend you looking at those to see which BSMD program maybe you fit your qualifications for. Um, but each BSMD program is really looking for a unique type of student to their program. So some might be more clinical, some might be more research based, some might be, a little bit more open to the type of student they're taking. Grades and test scores are really important, but also really important is the resume as well. So, you could have a 1600 on the SAT, a 4.0 on weighted GPA. And if you don't have the experiences to back up why, you want to be a doctor, it's really hard to get accepted into a BSMD program. So that's just kind of something to think about. No BSMD programs are necessarily safeties, um, but, it does come down to, I think, experiences a lot of the time too. So something to think about, unfortunately. And so a lot of our students are BSMD, and so this is a question we face a lot, and something we could honestly work with you on creating your list, making sure you're giving yourself the best chance possible. But there are some state-specific programs, like for example, if you're in Indiana, there's 3 programs that only accept Indiana students. Colorado has got the University of Colorado, only Colorado students. Um, UAB gives preference to Alabama students. So, there's kind of stuff like that that you can kind of consider that might help if you have a state program within you that gives preference to students in your state. Okay, one more question. So what's a good number of recommendation letters? So a lot of the times you do have to have your 2 teacher letters of recommendation. Sometimes you can have 3. And as for like outside letter of recommendations, I wouldn't go overboard. Like if they let you do 5 or 6 extra ones, I don't necessarily think that sometimes that's necessary. If it's better to go for quality rather than quantity. I would say, if you can get 2 really great outside letters of recommendation other than your teachers, like you're in a really good place. But, maybe you've done a lot of really cool activities and you want to have those letters of recommendation, so it ends up being 3. That's okay too. But, you know, having a ton of letters of recommendation sometimes isn't necessary. And when we are working with our BSMD students, actually, sometimes we do have them get more letters of recommendation than they need, and then they can pick and choose per each program. So some, like I was talking about, are more research focused, like the physician scientist program. That one, they might want to have their letter of recommendation from their like research mentor or something like that. If it's a more clinical focused BSMD program, maybe from their volunteering or from the doctor they shadowed or something along those lines. Kind of like trying to understand what the school wants, what kind of student they're looking for, what kind of experiences they're looking for can kind of help you as well. Okay, so looks like that's all the questions for now, but I know we're at 8 o'clock, so we've been going for the full hour. But I do have some more information, so if you guys will stick with me, we'll keep going and I'll definitely still answer questions. All right. So the last type of application deadline we're going to talk about today is regular admissions. That's the typical normal process by which students apply by the regular deadlines. And so these will typically be January 1st through February 1st. And you'll receive your admissions deadline no later than April 1st of your senior year, that 4th year. However, most colleges will give application the decisions well before April 1st. But the good news is for early action, restrictive early action, and regular decision and rolling admissions, you're not obligated to say whether or not you want to attend. You just have to let them know by May 1st. Whereas, remember, early decision, you have to let them know within 2 weeks. And if you're wondering what the rules are for applying early decision, luckily there are almost none, so it's really the easiest one. So you can apply to as many schools as you want. You'll find out sometime in the spring what those decisions are. If you go to a school, it isn't a binding decision. That means you can wait until May 1st to make your decision, to weigh options, weigh your financial aid packages. There are some pros. So you definitely have more time to work on your applications because those deadlines are a little bit later, 2 months later than the early action deadlines. So if you are applying to a school that requires you to take the SAT or ACT, it can be a good time for you if you need to boost your score. That can help you be eligible for more scholarships, perhaps, because a lot of those are tied to your GPA and your SAT or ACT score. And it gives you more time to perfect your college essays. So, college essays are obviously just one piece of the puzzle, but it's really important. You want to make sure that you are putting forth your best effort in the essays. If you have to rush to complete the essay, then it's probably not the right time to be applying. So, if it's the night before the early action deadline is due and you haven't started your personal statement, it's probably better to wait to the regular decision because you're going to put together probably a sloppy essay. It's not going to show off your best qualities. It's better to wait. Excuse me. Now, if you are applying regular decision, um, the downfall is you won't be applying, or sorry, you won't be hearing back from the college or university until the spring, or maybe even closer to the end of the school year in April. So this can make it kind of a little more stressful because you want to be packing your bags to head off somewhere in a couple months, but you just don't know where yet because you haven't heard back from schools. You don't know how much money you're going to get. So making the decision of where to attend college in late spring could add more stress to like AP exams and finals, and just senior year, senioritis, everything kind of happening at once. So if you have to weigh your options between multiple options, it can be stressful to put all that right at the end of the school year in just like a month of time. And if the school has early action, that's kind of why we do suggest you applying that over regular admissions. You have nothing to lose, you find out earlier, and that kind of helps you plan ahead and have a good strategy in place for your admissions. Okay, so here's a question. Are Ivy Leagues a reach or a target? They are always a reach for everyone. Those acceptance rates are 5%, 7%. I think the easiest Ivy League is Cornell at like 10%. It's not easy. Those are reaches for everyone. No matter who you are, you're top in your class, great grades, great SAT score. Um, super, uh, super reaches for everyone. Um, and before I forget, there's this admissions timeline, so you guys can also look at that as we're going. And so you can kind of see when everything is happening. So this is actually perfect for this question right here about what month is the earliest you can start applying. So literally the first deadline is October 15th, and that's in 9 days. That's UNC that I know of. I'm sure there's other ones, but a lot of them are November 1st, October 31st. And that means, most deadlines will be in, November 1st, November 15th are usually the most popular. ED decisions are released in December. Regular decision deadlines are in January. Early action and regular decisions sometimes are released early action a little bit earlier, but regular decisions will be March or April. And then by May 1st, you have to be mailing in your deposit. And to answer further your question, what month is the earliest you can start applying? If it's rolling, you can literally apply today. You could have applied a month ago. Some of them started in July. So, you could really start this process right now. So we have I worked with a student and yesterday, what was yesterday? Sunday, Saturday, one of those days, she sent in her first two applications. So it can be something that you're already doing. And I want to say thank you. I have had a lot of fun tonight with you guys. So I'm really glad you guys were all able to join us. And like I said, please subscribe, join our other events that we have, our webinars coming up. We have a couple of Ask Me Anything webinars. It'll be me and another counselor as well. So you can kind of get both of our expertise. We'll spend a full hour. We're doing it twice on the 22nd of October and the 4th of November. And we're going to be answering all your questions the full hour. We're not going to really have a presentation. So definitely come prepared for those. And if you do want to get some more information, we have our, there it is, the Google Docs PDF link. Yes. So this will be moonprep.com/resources. I see that's another question. I'm going to send it right here. And if you signed up on Eventbrite, I'll also be sending this link out to everyone too to make sure you have it. So there's a ton of information there. And just want to remind you guys too, if you haven't started your personal statement package yet, sorry, if you haven't started your personal statement yet, you can take advantage of our package. It's $199. You get a full brainstorming hour with a counselor. You get an outline that really will break down everything you need. Um, I can't remember if I shared this before, but I do have a link to the personal statement webinar we have. And if it's not coming up, you can check out it on our page. It's one of our recent webinars, but we have tons of information about, helping writing this personal statement. You get 2 rounds of edits. So even if you have those deadlines November 1st, we can help you get your personal statement ready to go by that point. Okay. So let's see if we have any other questions. I did have a couple questions that were sent to me before, so I'm going to answer them now. I'm going to post them in there so you just can kind of see. This one I kind of already answered before about the amount of extracurriculars. Does it matter? And the answer is definitely not. Um, they're looking more for um, quality rather than quantity. So don't feel like you need to join every single activity just because everyone else is. So it's more important to kind of think about what type of things you really like, what kind of skills you're learning. Even if you're not learning any skills, even if you just really love playing the violin, like that's okay. If you really just like sculpting, that's okay. It doesn't have to be necessarily something academic. It's better to pick something you really love, you're passionate about, and kind of growing with it over the time. Um, I see another question. When would you say is a good time to start drafting your essays? If you are a senior, the best time is definitely now. Get off this webinar, get drafting. If you're a junior, you have the luxury of time. So we start working with our juniors um, once summer hits, before their senior year, before that 4th year. So, senior year, the summer before, we start working on their personal statement because those prompts have already been released. So we start drafting with them, we start outlining them. So come August, their personal statement is beautiful and done. And then, once the school specific essays open up, we start working on those too. So we're trying to make sure that senior year is as unstressful as possible for our seniors. But that being said, we do have some students who are a little bit later in the game who literally just started writing their personal statement this week for deadlines on the 15th. It's a little bit more stressful, but as long as you start today, you can still get it done. All right, I had another question emailed into me beforehand, and this is about high schools and what high school you attend. So, does the high school I attend give me an advantage or disadvantage in admission regardless of grades? No. So the the admissions officers do understand where you're coming from. They're seeing what type of classes you had available. They're seeing what type of extracurriculars you had available. They're seeing what happened during the pandemic, and they're seeing what type of opportunities are available to you essentially. And so they're not going to judge someone who's from like rural Kentucky as someone who's like in the heart of, a magnet school in like New York City or something like that. It's completely different circumstances. The opportunities are very different. So they understand that and they're judging by a case basis. So you don't necessarily have to worry if a student is, you know, if your school maybe doesn't have as many APs, if they only had 2 APs, or if you could only take them your junior and senior year, they'll know that, and they'll see what you had, and they'll make sure that you were taking advantage of the opportunities you had, even if they were less compared to someone else. Um, I see we have a question about supplementals. We did not really cover supplementals, so you can ask a couple questions about supplementals. Um, and then another question, does what we covered today apply for universities outside the US or within the US only? So most of my information is US only. Just because it is so, the rules are so specific. So if you're interested in applying outside of the US, better to check the individual country because the information is likely very different. And then I had one more question emailed into me about whether or not we know if a university best fits me, what factors should I consider? So whenever I'm talking to my students, I get them to think kind of about what kinds of things they are looking for in a university. I'm going to go here so you can also get our information. But I think about what type of things they might want from a university. Like, are they interested in a specific type of program? Are they interested in a specific, major? Are they open? Do they want big classes, little classes? Do they want like a rich extracurricular life, public versus private, close to home, away from home? It's really hard to know, which university might be the best fit, but a lot of times visiting is the best way, but since that's impossible right now, I really do recommend that you virtually visit schools. You start going there virtually and seeing what might be right for you. Talking to students who are attending the university is a good idea because they're the ones living it and kind of seeing what they are offering. But it can be hard right now, especially in pandemic era, to understand which school might be right for you. But that's kind of what we recommend is, start thinking about what you want from a school, what kind of things it might be, if it's research, if it's a certain type of club, a certain type of major. The ability to change majors is kind of something to think about. This is a great follow-up question to what I was talking about high schools before, but if your school doesn't offer any AP or higher level classes, will it affect my chances of being accepted? No, because they know that you didn't have any AP classes or higher level classes, so they won't hold it against you. The schools will have like kind of a report on what was available, what kind of opportunities were available, so they'll be able to see there were no AP classes, he couldn't take any, so it's okay. But that being said, if there's like 20 AP classes and you didn't take any, they'd be like, why didn't he take any? So, kind of something to think about. Okay. So, for best time to work on supplementals, right now, definitely start right away. If you're applying to a school and their deadline's October 15th, October 31st, November 1st, whatever it might be, you need to start working on those because those will have to go with your common application as well. You can look on the Common App, and there'll be on, whenever you add in your schools, there'll be a section that says writing and additional questions, and you can go through there and find which ones you want to, that you'll need to submit. You can also look on websites, but those are a little less easy to find sometimes. So I recommend just going right to the Common App and asking from there or figuring out from there. Okay. Oof, this is a good question. So the major I want to apply to into requires that I've taken calculus, but my school doesn't have it. Does that mean I shouldn't apply at all? That's a really great question. So I would actually reach out to the admissions officers directly and ask them what their qualifications are. Because some schools, will understand that and they won't mind. Maybe you can even take it over the summer at the community college or online or something like that. That might be a way to get around that. But I would reach out to them directly at the school and ask them what they will require. Okay. Now, this is an interesting question. How do we find out which colleges, universities restrict pre-med students from applying to medical schools? Is this for BSMD programs? I'm going to assume it's BSMD. Um, let's see if there's a follow-up. No. Um, so for usually, if you're just a normal pre-med student at the normal traditional school, you won't be restricted from applying to medical schools. Um, if you're applying to a BSMD program, those are a little bit different. And for the most part, they will be listed on their website, which ones do allow you to apply out, which ones require you to, only apply at theirs, interview and apply to their medical school. Otherwise, you give up your spot. So it just kind of is on a case by case basis. I would definitely check out the websites for that one to figure out which one will or will not let you apply out if you're in a BSMD program. Okay. This is a good question. Will the process be different for homeschooled students? Nope, it's the exact same for you. So you might have to go through a little bit different because of the counselor section. I've never worked with a homeschool student before, so I don't have a ton of information for you, unfortunately, but the whole application process in general will be the same. They will obviously know that you're homeschooled because that will be very clear in your academic section. You might have to do a little bit different to like verify that you did receive the classes and pass and everything like that. But I'm sure you already have been doing that in general with state regulations. But I unfortunately don't have more information for you on that one. So sorry. Okay. So I see another question. Should I go to a local community college to boost my stats? I mean, it could be a good idea. The only thing I would be careful about is a lot of the times when you are going to community college beforehand and getting quite a few classes under your belt, um, you are then considered a transfer into a school. So that's kind of something to think about because if you're a transfer, then a lot of times the scholarships will be different. It won't be as easy. So I would just, look into the specific rules before you start taking classes because you might cost you thousands of dollars. So just kind of some advice. Um, and yeah, same advice for that kind of that follow up about to boost your stats. Um, it's okay if your school doesn't offer the AP or the IB diploma. That's okay. So I wouldn't. I would say kind of tread lightly with the local community college courses. See what each university requires, what they require, or what they classify as a transfer student versus a non-transfer student. And make sure you're not losing money on those automatic like freshman scholarships that I was talking about, those merit scholarships that you have to apply to that are only available to freshmen. So that's kind of the thing to watch out for. Okay, so I think that's the last question. Um, but if um, if you do have any other questions, feel free to email us. You can either email us directly at this hello@moonprep.com. I'll also be sending you an email after this if you signed up on our Eventbrite page with some links and some resources for you guys, as well as more information about a special offer. Um, and yeah, feel free. You can set up a meeting to talk to us and figure out how we can help you apply to college. No matter what year you are in school, if you're freshman, sophomore, senior, junior, I knew I forgot one, we can help you. I'll send that link as well to you guys in that email so you can see, how best we can help you throughout this college application process. So thank you everyone so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.